Okay, so I just got a question about my signal chain, um, and like the way I have my instruments set up in my orchestral template. So this is it. I'll load that up, and then while this is going, I'm gonna go ahead and play this example just to see what you might be able to achieve with like a similar setup to mine. And the ending's not finished, so don't mind the writing here. But I think that that sounds pretty cohesive. And okay, so this is it. So I have all these folders. Let me just shut them all. I have all these folders up here, and they are my different sections. This is purely. I know Logic. I don't know anything about Pro Tools. I'm sorry, but I know Logic has folders. The folders can also be like they can be your stems. I think. Um, in Cubase, the folders are just folders. So this is purely for my own sanity when I'm working on something, just for my own organizational benefit. It's not for summing. So like VW woodwinds, that's not like a stem that I'm having, or like, yeah, I don't know. Um, so if we just go down the line, uh, basically for a while I was using free stuff, but I was watching oodles and oodles and oodles of demos and for different libraries. And so I ended up getting one. I allowed myself to get one library per section. So for woodwinds, I got V Winds, which is by Acoustic Samples, and those are all in here. And then I got um, Aaron Venture Brass, his Infinite Brass, and then I got Abbey Road One, Orchestral Foundations. I got that mostly for the percussion because I was looking on the Spitfire website, and they have like they try to get you because they don't have like a like common percussion. They don't have like a common percussion library. So like most people don't really use like I don't know all these weird drums that they've put in, but they split out like the bass drum and the snare drum, for example, um, into two different libraries. And so then if you wanted to get the bass and the snare for uh, with different mic positions, so you have to buy the full version. They're like $300 a piece or something. So that would have been $600 for percussion. So I thought that was dumb, and I decided that I would buy Abbey Road One Orchestral Foundations because this has different mic positions and it has a bass drum and a snare. It has more of like the like essential percussion, if that makes sense. So that's what I use. And then for a couple things that I mean, I don't really have like a proper percussion library, so I'm still using this is the Orchestral Tools free Mark tree, and I use that a lot. And then I also have this free VSL. It's got sleigh bells. Oh no, did that just crash? Okay. Well, anyway, I have the I have this is probably because I decided to update to Mac OS 26, and I don't think I should have done that, but I did, and now Cubase is spotty. Um, Anyway, and then all my pianos are free. Yeah, all these pianos and harps are free. I mean, this is from like the Contact Complete 8. And then as far as strings, so strings, I have two libraries. I have, besides, I just loaded these Abbey Road things in here, so you can see I like loaded the Abbey Road strings. I loaded the Abbey Road brass and the Abbey Road, but I don't use them. I mean, I occasionally use, I like this High Winds short patch. I like that. And I think that's good for like beefing up because these are all solo woodwinds, so I sometimes use that every once in a while. But that's really the only thing I use outside of the percussion. And then strings I have, so I have from performance samples, small strings, ensembles, light, which this is going to break my computer. I don't know why I did that. I'll just get a couple of these. But basically, it's like he recorded a chamber string section, but they're all playing together, except for the basses. So violins, violas, and cellos are all playing together. And I think that sounds really good. And then just for like from a workflow standpoint, I like to have these ensembles here, and then my big is Pacific is the symphonic size, so those ensembles down here, and then I have violins. I have legatos. I don't know why I have two cellos. I have legatos of then the individual sections, and then if I really wanted to, which I do try to not use these ensembles as much, and then go instead for a section sound. So like say that I needed a trill. If I only used it once, I might just play it and then shut the folder again. But if I'm using something over and over, I'll just like take it out, and then that way, then you're not having like all these always there, if that makes sense. So that's the reasoning behind that setup. My choirs aren't any good. The only one this is a free thing from the Dominus Pro choir. I like the way that it sounds, and I bought Spitfire original for $30. But that's that. So let's go into the mixing. So basically what I do is I have all of my instruments in a folder like this, and then those instruments get summed into the groups. So these two piccolos are routed to this piccolo down here, and then these flutes go, actually all these flutes go to the flute, and then all the oboes go to the oboe, and so on and so forth. Same thing for the brass. So we have brass groups, which are horns, trumpets, trombones, tuba, and low brass. And then the infinite brass, they're all solo instruments, but they do have like some humanized features, which make it easy to make ensembles. So I've done like some common things like 6 horns, or having like my 6 horns split out into 2s. I have that kind of preset up for me. And then so all those groups, these groups go into, and then obviously I have like some kind of basic percussion kind of groups. Then my strings I've split out. So because I only have one library per section, like I only have V-winds here, I just made one per thing. If I, for example, had V-winds and, I don't know, Berlin woodwinds or something, then I would probably have a separate one for my Berlin woodwinds piccolos down here. I would try to mix my libraries differently is what I guess I'm trying to say. But I don't have that. I do have one thing for these ensemble woodwinds, so I can mix them differently than the V-winds. But the strings, even though they are from the same library, minus the small string ensembles light, I separated out the shorts, because string shorts I don't want to have as much reverb as my string longs, which is not technically realistic, but it's something that a lot of people do. So like this, I can get away with more reverb. You would want more reverb on a line like that than on like I don't know. I'll just do this really quick. But like then something like this, you don't want. If you had too much reverb on that, that would not sound good at all. We'll turn the clip. Okay, and then something else which I've done to help further combat. So here, for example, this is a symphonic size string. A lot of people will have a symphonic size. So let's do that. This is this on that. The way that I have it. So you can hear there's still a tail, but it's not too long. And it's not, I don't think it's super muddy. I mean, I'm still working, but I think that's pretty good. This is how it would sound if it was exactly out of the box. So I'll put this to, or this is how it would sound if it was in your template with reverb. But what I've done is I've really lowered this release. So this is what it is at the max, 25K. I have it at 2K. But so you can hear they're merging into each other. So if you lower this, and you can even hear this with just the plain. So let me put this to the stereo out. Oh gosh, why is that not doing that? Okay. So then if I take this here, I mean, it's still like not totally, you know, I think even if you were just doing this completely dry, which you could do, this is the thing, all of this like weird mixing and stuff is only necessary when you have more than one library. If the ideal scenario would be to have one perfect library that would just mix together like by itself. But I think turning this down helps. So it's like, it's almost like you can hear the players in the room. Like here. Like you can, I don't know. If you turn this down, it's like like how people's bodies would be absorbing it if it was like an orchestra. Like you can kind of hear it like getting absorbed. I don't know. I think it makes it more realistic. But then yeah. So I've got these groups that come out of the instruments. And these are my group tracks down here. So then all of like violins, violins 2, violas, cello, basses, and then same thing for the respective brass groups. They're all going down into here. Okay. Where I have flutes, oboes, clarinets, bass clarinets, I just kept the low brass L's one. And then this is an odd setup. Okay, this is not a typical setup. Most people will just use the faders to balance. Maybe I should bring this up. Okay, most people will just use the faders to balance. So they will use these, and then they can say, oh, I want a little bit more flute in this section. They'll turn this up, or they'll, you know, like automate it like that. But I don't do that because I decided that I wanted to have parallel compression. And then I also decided, for some reason, that I wanted my parallel compression to go into the reverb, to also be reverbified. Because if I were to do this and I had this send to the par, I call it par comp. If I had this send to the par comp and I had this just send to my reverb, and I kept this like where it was, then the parallel compression would be dry. I think, if that makes sense. I don't know. I don't know whether that makes sense or not. But yeah, I just separated that out. So then I control this via synths. If you've seen Anne Catherine Dern, she has a very similar. That's where I started. I started by copying her setup as far as the parallel compression, and then. But so yeah, so then over on the parallel compression, that's where it gets sent to the reverb. Actually, technically, let me explain this again. So I wouldn't have to do this weird thing with the volumes being totally off, except for that I'm using Berlin Studio, and I want the Berlin Studio to be the only thing that you hear. I don't want you to hear the dry signal at all. I mix in the dry signal using Berlin Studio, but I don't want you to hear the dry signal directly from the instrument groups. So that's why this has to be turned totally off. And then these are going like that. I didn't do it on the percussion. I guess I must have thought that sounded better, but Yeah, and I don't have this on, like, if I was to ever use a synth or any sound design, I don't have that turned on by default, because those you would not try to pretend usually that they're in the same room, but I could. And so then these are the instrument stems. They have exact copies here. These are the parallel compression stems, which I already showed you. They're sent to the Berlin Studio. So these are my Berlin Studio returns. So Berlin Studio, I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it's pretty nice. So it has these different sections that you can click on. So this is set to woodwinds, but like, there's a different one for violins and a different one for violas, and they have IRs that are sent from the actual, the place where the instruments would supposedly be sitting. And then what I have is I have that set up for everything. So then all of these instruments go into, like the flutes, go into the Berlin woodwinds. The trumpets go into the Berlin trumpets, like that. And then my Berlin Studios, I just have, and this is actually this is the reason that I wanted to have the faders off. I wouldn't have to have the faders off if I didn't use this like auto delay thing, but I think that it makes it sound more real because it's like compensating for where this is. And so then what I have is I have the source still pretty high, so I don't like turn off the dry signal. This is the dry signal right here. So the source is 6 dBs higher than the decade tree. Then it just kind of, as the mics get farther out, I turn them down a little bit. And then I have a different one. So this is the whole reason I had my strings set up differently with the shorts. I just totally muted them. So I totally muted these off. So I guess I'm not using Berlin Studio at all with the shorts. Anyway, sometimes I turn these on. I can change these. And the nice thing is about, if I turn this Q link, and then, like when you fill it with something, it makes it go all at once. And so you can actually do it with plugins too. So what I do is I will just grab all of them, and then like I can click one of these faders and move it, and they'll all move. So I can manipulate the reverb, and I can automate it here, which I do every once in a while if I'm really feeling inspired, I guess. And then these are my real stems, which is what I guess I would consider like export ready. If I was gonna give someone stems, this is probably what I would give them. So all of the Berlin Studio thingies are going into these woodwind, brass, strings, percussion, piano, harp, choir. If they needed more split out stems, then I could obviously send them these. So in a way, I guess this is my stems. These are like the Berlin Studios are my stems. And then I have, if somebody wanted individual instruments, I would just send them a violins 1 stem, and then a violins 2 stem, and then a viola stem, and then, for the woodwinds, I would probably just duplicate, because they only have 1 IR for the woodwinds. I would just duplicate this so that I could have a flute 1 and an oboe 1 and other ones like that. Then the other thing that I do use a room tone every once in a while, so I just have one preloaded. But basically, it's like room ambience. I think this makes a big difference if you have a solo part, because when there's a clear silence, a complete silence, there will never be complete silence in a recording. So like, say that I was doing a little horn thing, and it was like, okay, so I have this gap right here is unrealistic. It sounds fine in between each of these notes, because the IR from Infinite Brass, which I guess I should show you. So the IR I'm using is the default Mozartium, and I haven't changed any mics. So that plus the Berlin Studio is creating enough tail, but you hear here the tail is died out. So what I do is rather than add more reverb, you can use a room tone. And that is basically why my string shorts reverb is totally off. I guess I just pretend that this is their reverb. But this just gives you. Now you could believe that this was like played at a concert just by that like small little hiss, and I can turn this up and down. Yeah, that's that. So then in terms of mic positions, I haven't got infinite brass is exactly as the default. I've fiddled around for a while with trying to EQ them because I don't really like the tone on the trombones. It's awesome for like articulations, but the core tone is not my favorite. But it gets better the more that if you add like two of them playing at once and stuff. Anyway, I haven't changed those mics. I have changed this is another. I bought this on Black Friday for $20. It's really good though. The Strezov Orchestra flute. If you want to take a listen. But basically, for all of the V-winds, what I have is I have them set to the Symphony Orchestra preset. So here's a demo of the difference between what the defaults. This is the default. And for some reason, this is going to the stereo out. I don't know why that is. I was messing around with this earlier, so it could be that. Okay, I don't know why that's there. But I'll put this back to VW flute, and I'll put this back to VW flute. So this is the Symphony Orchestra. And I just found, especially up here, I think that sounds pretty realistic. I like the air that has. The original, there's less air. If that makes sense. But I do use, if I want to have them have like sound like they were solo, like overdubbed or something, then I'd use. I'm not fixed on anything with those presets. So that's what the mics are. I haven't done anything with the mics for the percussion. I should. That's something that I'm working on doing. This is my piano. And then the nice thing is, if you have using a convolution reverb like this. So I know you asked whether you could use a convolution reverb, Valhalla room, just by itself. And I would say that I would really recommend getting a convolution reverb. It does not have to be Berlin Studio. Spitfire has one from Air Studios, which I think has similar. And then another thing, you want to also have, if you can, have a convolution reverb that has different spaces. So like a different space for woodwinds or a different space for strings. I know east-west spaces actually. So if you have Composer Cloud, if you have Hollywood Orchestra, they have a lot of good convolution reverbs that have like a woodwind thing and a brass thing and a horns thing, which can be helpful. And then I basically also have some optional reverbs if I would like to go beyond what I consider my realistic large concert hall sound. If I have Black Hole, I have this is another IR. This is Todd AO, which I found somewhere on the internet. I forget where. And then I also found somebody had uploaded like Seventh Heaven IR. So these are just loaded into like the default Cubase reverb. But if you can find, I think Simplicity has, or not Seventh Heaven, not because it's the Bricasti. But that's basically where everything goes. I can show you, I guess, what I mean. So the reason I do all this is because I think that, and I wouldn't have to. So I wouldn't have to if I had all my libraries from the same developer. or the same room, recorded with the same mics. So, for example, if I was a Spitfire fan and I had the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra and I had Spitfire chamber strings and I had, um, I don't know, whatever else they've done in Air, the Albions or something, then all those would blend, their rooms would blend pretty effortlessly without you doing anything to them. So that would be optimal, except that I didn't really like how they were programmed. But I mean, in terms of the sound, that's what's gonna be optimal. So the reason I'm doing this is because they're not recorded in the same space. So like if I play, let me get something raw. So here's where these would sound kind of by themselves. This is probably why, I do this kind of stuff a lot. So that's probably why that was stereo out. And then also the strings. So if you listen to like a combo of these three instruments playing, first of all, it's very dry. So you can hear the flute's not in the same room at all. Same thing. The horn and the flute might sound a bit better. No, it doesn't. It's way farther back. So obviously, that sounds fine by itself, but it's just when you have these different things together. They don't sound good at all, in my opinion. This is what I think a lot of the mock-ups sound like, that I end up listening to. But if I do instruments that I have actually done the proper mixing on, and then I do that with a different horn 5. So I think that sounds infinitely better, in terms of having proper different rooms. I think this sounds a lot more realistic. So that's the reasoning. That's my setup. I think if you have any questions, you can just write me, and I'll try my best to answer. But I think that's everything. So again, I have instruments going to groups. These groups are where I usually would balance while I'm writing. So like if in a particular section I wanted to have a little bit more piccolo, which would be a very rare occurrence, then I can basically like come in here and crank that up in that specific spot. But so those instruments go then to the regular instrument stems, which I've assigned both to the parallel compression at 0 and to the Berlin Studio reverb at 0, because I basically just want to get the parallel compression sound and the regular sound. Actually, no, this is totally turned off. I just like to have it as an option, but I want those to both be inside of Berlin Studio, and then they all go to the stereo out. If I was doing a hybrid production, I would probably take all of the, or if I was recording live, but that's basically it. So